Hi folks, Dr. Kenny here. What we're going to try to do for you today is provide a bit of a review, a bit of an overview of all the stuff we've been doing this term, and we're going to paint in very broad strokes, but just to kind of give you a sense of kind of where we're at and the kinds of things you should be thinking about as you're getting ready for your midterm. Okay, so we've covered a lot of time and a lot of material this term, starting pre-contact period, taking us all the way up to Confederation. That's what you're responsible for the midterm. So let's go back to where we began. So we started with contact, okay? And if you remember, we started with Jacques Cartier arriving, he's from France, and arrives on the St. Lawrence River in 1534. And we usually kind of mark that as the beginning of kind of significant contact here in what we today call Canada. Cartier arrives in 1534, but he's not going to settle. He's going to make 3 voyages. He's going to discover a few things. He's going to meet Donnacona. Some things like that are going to happen. But we're not actually going to start to see settlement until the early 1600s. But between 1534 and when that settlement begins, interest begins to grow in North America. It begins initially. Remember, people were looking for gold and they want to get a quick trip to Asia and that sort of thing. They don't find that, but what they do find is a fishery, the cod fishery. And cod is a very valuable commodity during this period of time. So we start to see the development of a fishery, okay? And we talked about the differences between the wet and the dry fishery, or the wet and the green. And the difference being is that when the fishers, who weren't only French, by the way, we had people from Portugal coming, Spain, England, they were coming. If they were to kind of salt the fish on deck, then they would, they could take the fish back, would be salted. Sometimes they would actually stop and dry the fish, and that's where you start to see contact, okay? So that fishery begins in this period, really kind of beginning in the 1500s, okay? And so we started to see movement back and forth there. So on a regular basis. But in the early, by the late 1500s, early 1600s, there's an interest in another commodity that's based in North America, and that is the furs. And that fur, and we're going to start to see furs become an important part of the reasons why Europeans are going to come over here, and the fur industry is going to be an important part of the economy really for quite some time. Okay, so this is when the fur trade really starts to take off in the early 1600s. It's one of the reasons that these folks come, a group first comes to settle in Acadia in 1604. And Acadia, by the way, is modern-day Nova Scotia. And another group led by Samuel de Champlain that are going to arrive in 1608 and settle in Quebec. Okay, that is going to be and it's the fur trade that's going to kind of be driving that initially. Now, the numbers of people that are coming are really small. These settlements are really small. But one of the things that happens in order to kind of prosecute the fur trade, to develop the fur trade, is that these European newcomers, the French, are going to make alliances with indigenous peoples there. They're going to start, and if we look at in Acadia, the alliances will be with the Mi'kmaq, and in Quebec, the French are going to quickly make alliances with the Algonquin, and importantly, the Wendat, or the Huron. And we've talked about them a few times in the class. The Huron they're significant because they were the middlemen in a trading system that predated Europeans arriving. So they are well set up to kind of participate in this trade, and the French kind of take advantage of that. And the Wendat also going to be trading for goods on their own as well. So we see a trading alliance which is going to emerge between the French and these various First Nations, okay? Now, I should mention at the same time that this is all happening here. If you look at our time period, from as we move into the early 1600s, The English and the Dutch are also establishing colonies to the south in modern-day United States. And they will be making alliances with First Nations of their own, in particular the Haudenosaunee or the Five Nations Iroquois. And that'll be important as we move on. Okay, so that's what's happening here. The other thing is as the French are kind of making contact and establishing these alliances, there's going to be other elements to that. One is that they, as part of that trade, they are also going to be insisting that Catholic missionaries are going to go and try to convert and live with various their allies, and particularly the Wendat. And so we see missionaries are going to be part of this story. These missionaries are going to, they will certainly be challenging the traditional culture, but they, as well as the traders, are also going to be bringing new diseases, okay? And this is going to have a tremendous social impact on the various First Nations. And we spent some time talking about the Wendake in particular, how disease kind of wiped out a large number of the people there. So disease is going to happen there. There is the arrival of the missionaries and the French traders. It's also going to create divisions within the First Nations, within the Wendake, for instance, because there are those who are open to trading with the French. There are those who are open to allowing the missionaries in. But there were also traditionalists who very much opposed having this challenge to their culture. And they also saw, they kind of recognized that disease accompanied the Europeans. So there were divisions that emerged as well, okay? On top of that, this trading relationship between the First Nations, particularly the Wendake and the Algonquin and the French, this trading relationship is going to exacerbate existing tensions that existed between particularly the Wendake and the Haudenosaunee, the Five Nations Iroquois, who were trading with the English and the Dutch. And those tensions are going to come to a head in 1649, and we've talked about the fall of Huronia, the fall of Wendake, and you recall the article we read. Some of it dealt with, kind of the reasons why Wendake fell. Part of it is disease, part of it's division. All of those kinds of things kind of lead to that. And we often view the fall of Wendake as kind of a key moment in this period of early contact, a period when we sort of see kind of the impact of kind of European societies, European newcomers on indigenous societies. I want to take just a quick break here just to kind of add something I should have told you at the very beginning. This timeline we've created, okay? At the very top, we've kind of got big themes that are big periods. So this is the early contact period. And so we got some big themes at the top. We're going to look at political issues on the second line. We're looking at economic issues on this line. And we're looking at social issues on the very bottom. These are all big themes. When you're responding to questions on exams, you should always think in those terms, having those various factors. Okay, the other thing I should mention is that 1649 is kind of a crucial moment. It's the end of Wendake. It's the end of it's going to create an issue for the French in New France, that they've lost a major trading ally. Now, I should have mentioned, and I will right now, is that New France at this time is very small, okay? The number of people are only coming over, are largely engaged in the fur trade. By the time we get to the 1640s, we're starting to get some religious peoples coming over, but there's really people aren't coming over with their families. Okay, this is a small place. The settlement, okay, the responsibility for settlement at this stage was not the crown, not the government of France. The responsibility was basically privatized. It was sent out to the private fur trade companies were responsible for populating the area. And it's largely not very successful, okay? company of 100 associates is one example. So the population here is quite small, okay? So 1649, fall of Wendake creates a real challenge for France. They've lost their ally. I should mention also that they've lost a kind of a food supply. If you remember the Wendat, they actually kind of grew food, so they've lost that as well. And so coming out of 1649, the French have to they have to kind of adapt to this new environment. One thing they do is they take a new approach to the fur trade. No longer are they kind of waiting for the Huron, who are the middlemen, to bring furs to them. They started to go out themselves too, and this is when we start to see the voyageurs taking off in a big way. We also, they're also going to have to look into some small-scale farming to kind of as well. And the other thing is one of the other things that the Huron did, and the Algonquin were big allies and helped as military allies, particularly against the Haudenosaunee, the Five Nations Iroquois. And so throughout this period between 1649 and into the 1660s, the small settlements that existed in New France are going to be, there'll be lots of raids by the Haudenosaunee. And so this is creating a real challenge for New France. And so this is leads us to our next major moment, okay? And this is the period of where New France becomes a royal colony, okay? So the king of France at that time, Louis XIV, decided that the way he was going to take firm hold of this colony. He liked to have colonies. It was great for imperial power and prestige and all that sort of stuff. And he takes hold of it. And so he makes New France a royal colony in 1663. What does this mean? It means that he's going to kind of basically take responsibility for settlement. He'll take responsibility for basically kind of creating a political structure where an appointed governor, there'll be this kind of essentially the chief executive officer, a person known as an intendant, who will kind of be looking after the day-to-day running of the place. They will create a system of courts. All of these things will be kind of, so there's a governmental structure that comes with that. Military defense. He will send a kind of regiment, carrying on a Salière regiment, which is going to come over and help defend. There will be a militia that will be created as well. So there's defense as part of that. There's courts. There is government structure. The other thing that is going to be important is that kind of a way of kind of organizing land. And so they establish, or the seigneurial system existed, but it becomes much more important part of New France after that. So the seigneurial system, as you recall, was a way of kind of a system of land distribution. And that the king had basically kind of not quite granted, but gave responsibility to various seigneurs who were, or equivalent of lords, to look after that land, but they were also to bring people over, okay? The seigneurial system, important for a lot of reasons. It's a way of kind of divvying up land, those long rectangular sections that you can still see when you fly into Dorval Airport. But it also creates a class system, okay? Where you've got seigneurs and you've got habitants or censitaires. The habitants or censitaires are like peasants. They're going to be kind of working the land. They're the people that the seigneurs bring over. There are also groups, kind of indentured servants or engagés, okay, who are also brought over. This is how this place is going to get populated, okay. The other thing I should tell you as well, economically, okay, the fur trade is going to continue to be very important, okay, but early on in the royal colony, they decide initially to kind of make something called a compact colony. They decide that rather than kind of having voyageurs spread out and going all through the interior North America, they wanted to control things a bit more and keep things much closer to kind of the base of New France, Quebec and Montreal. And so this becomes known as the compact colony, okay? And it was attempt to kind of control the fur trade. Now, this was an important aspect of, or element of kind of the royal colony, is that it was also based on this policy of kind of mercantilism, okay? We've talked about mercantilism before throughout the course, but mercantilism, the idea that colonies are there only for the benefit of the mother country, okay? The theory is a little more complex than that, but for our purposes, that'll do. But that meant that the government in France, through the governor who was appointed, was going to keep a tight hand on anything that was going on economically in the colony, okay? So the fur trade is one element of that. They started to develop kind of the idea was to create a self-sufficient colony, so they're going to get kind of grow some food. And there'll be timber that will be destined for the French, for the French Navy as well, that will be kind of produced in New France. So that's the economic element of this story here. I should mention that in going for this idea around a compact colony and trying to kind of restrict movement, the government of France actually created an opening for for the English to kind of move into Hudson's Bay. And we'll see the creation of the Hudson's Bay Company in 1670. And that will be a kind of a major competitor for furs in North America, and really right up until Confederation. Okay. By the way, in response to that, the creation of the Hudson's Bay Company, the governors in New France decide that they're going to actually kind of challenge the Hudson's Bay Company by moving into the interior themselves, so turn their back on the compact colony idea, start to move, and we start to see lots of exploration, moving down through the Mississippi River area, through the Illinois River area, and eventually by 1682 establishing a foothold in Louisiana. So this is a period of tremendous exploration. You've got the Hudson's Bay Company, which was English and Scottish, kind of doing their thing up north, and then you've got this kind of movement into the interior by the French. And indeed, France actually kind of makes a claim to all of North America at this time, though it could not really assert that claim. Okay, so as we move through here, then what have I missed? I think we've got that. Then as we move forward, so this military support.
I got to switch sides.
Yep. This military support that had been given given to the colony through the regiment and through the militia is successful in initially in kind of establishing a peace with the Haudenosaunee. Okay, but as the French start moving into the interior, tensions are going to kind of build again. And so by the time we get to 1684, the French and the Iroquois are going to be back at war again. And indeed, they will continue to be at war until 1701, when eventually a kind of a peace, something known as the Great Peace, or the Peace Settlement of 1701 of Montreal is established, or is agreed to by the Iroquois, the French, and a number of other First Nations, just bringing peace to the interior, okay? But this was going on during this period of time. At the same time that you've got these kind of, what I would describe as kind of domestic concerns, okay? Domestic conflicts between the French in New France and the Haudenosaunee, you've also got imperial wars in Europe that are spilling over, okay? And this is going to be really beginning in 1689 and really going right through into the conquest in 1759-60. There is just a kind of almost a constant state of periodic wars in Europe that will spill over into North America. The first of these was the War of the League of Augsburg, 1689, 1697, and it's going to bring those English settlements to the south into conflict with New France, but also in some cases, various First Nations are going to be fighting with either side. Okay, and this is where these alliances are. So this is going to be a challenge. It's going to be something we're seeing throughout. Another one of those wars, the second one I want to mention, is the War of the Spanish Succession, which takes place 1702, 1713. That's another European war, spills over. Once again, going to draw various First Nations into the conflict, but what's really significant about in terms of North America and for New France, what happens is as a result of the treaty that ends that war, the Treaty of Utrecht, a very important treaty, Acadia, or mainland Nova Scotia, becomes a British possession, okay? That it transfers hands, okay? And that is also the treaty basically asserts that Newfoundland is a British territory, as is the area around Hudson's Bay. Okay, so all of that kind of transfers to the British, or the French acknowledge that it's British. First Nations would have a very different opinion on all this. And so that brings us to the Treaty of 1713, the Treaty of Utrecht, kind of a crucial moment, a real kind of, I guess, a watershed moment as we move into the next phase of our story.